All right, let's jump right into this explainer and completely, and I mean literally, reshape how we look at the environment around us. We so often think of society and nature as two entirely separate things, right? We picture society as cities, industries, and people, while nature is this pristine forest or untouched mountain peak. But today, we're going to use this incredible source material to deconstruct that assumption. We're going to explore how deeply intertwined human society and the biophysical world truly are, and how our social structures fundamentally dictate the health and the future of our planet.
To break this all down, we'll be moving through 5 key areas. First, how society shapes the environment. Then, the values and resource control behind it. After that, a deep dive into the Bhopal disaster, followed by major environmental risks, and finally, the inequality of ecology.
So, Part 1. Society shapes the environment. Deconstructing nature.
Let's challenge everything you think you know about nature. Take a look around. Is the wilderness we see truly completely untouched by human hands? We're so conditioned to believe that an arid desert or a flood-prone river are just, natural features. But the source text points out something mind-blowing. Deforestation in the upper catchment of a river can actually be the exact thing making that river flood-prone in the first place. It's incredibly difficult to untangle the natural from the human factors when we look at ecological change.
Actually, it's fascinating because so many of these supposedly pristine landscapes were literally engineered by humans. Take the Ridge Forest in Delhi. It isn't natural vegetation at all. It was planted by the British back in 1915 using a tree species brought all the way from South America. And what about those gorgeous wide grassy meadows in Corbett National Park? The ones that give you those perfect wildlife views? Yeah, they were once active agricultural fields. Local villagers were deliberately relocated just to create the illusion of a pristine wilderness.
To really grasp this, we need to redefine ecology. It's not just nature out there. It's a massive web of physical and biological systems, and humans are fundamentally woven right into it. We aren't just outside observers peeking in. We're an active, driving gear in the machine. Every single time we build a farm reliant on synthetic fertilizers or construct a city out of concrete and glass, we're generating a social environment, one that emerges from this intense two-way street between biophysical ecology and human intervention.
Massive human interventions, like huge dam structures, brilliantly illustrate this permanent alteration. When we build colossal structures like this, we're diverting rivers and causing irreversible shifts to the ecology of entire water basins. We aren't just borrowing a resource for a bit. Human interventions increasingly have the power to alter environments permanently, which really proves the point. Society shapes nature just as much as nature shapes society.
Moving on to Section 2, Values and Resource Control, or more importantly, who exactly shapes nature?
Think back to the Industrial Revolution. It didn't just change cities, it altered ecology on a global scale. Just to feed the cotton mills of Britain, vast, sprawling areas of North America were transformed into plantations. And that insatiable demand drove the transatlantic slave trade, which in turn collapsed West Africa's agricultural economy, leaving behind literal wastelands. So one single industry essentially rewired environments across 3 different continents.
So it becomes crystal clear that our treatment of the environment is entirely dictated by underlying social values. Capitalist values, for example, might reduce a river's wildly complex ecology into a simple calculation of profit and loss. On the flip side, socialist values have historically driven the seizure of land for equal redistribution. Meanwhile, religious values can inspire fierce protection of things like sacred groves, or conversely, justify the belief in a divine sanction to exploit the earth entirely. In short, our social values literally construct the environment around us.
This brings us to Section 3. A devastating case study on institutional failure, the Bhopal disaster.
This timeline is truly harrowing. It details how repeated explicit safety warnings about the Union Carbide pesticide factory in Bhopal were just systematically ignored for years. Back in the late 70s, a municipal officer actually issued a notice for the plant to move. The response? He was simply transferred. Fast forward to May 1982, U.S. experts point out alarming safety lapses. Yet again, the government completely ignored the warnings. And this willful blindness led directly to the tragic night of December 3, 1984, when a deadly methyl isocyanate gas leak killed around 4,000 people and left 200,000 permanently disabled.
Our source text notes that these disastrous oversights were heavily tied to political connections and, frankly, lavish hospitality.
The Center for Science and Environment reported that the company employed relatives of powerful politicians. Its legal advisor was a high-ranking political leader, and its posh guest house was always at the disposal of politicians. There are even reports that the chief minister's wife received lavish hospitality from the company in the U.S. It's a stark example of public safety and environmental health being completely compromised by social and political power dynamics. Because let's be clear, this wasn't just some freak accident. It was a cascade of unmonitored, systemic failures. Union Carbide's plant was severely underdesigned. It completely lacked the computerized early warning systems that were standard in their U.S. factories. Add to that, staffing was drastically cut, making it nearly impossible to monitor safety tasks, and critical instruments were simply left broken. It is a textbook, heartbreaking example of an industrial environment transforming into a fragile, risk society the moment profit overrides safety.
Let's pivot to Section 4, Major Environmental Risks and Modern Complexities.
Listen to this number, 7 million. In 2012 alone, total deaths linked to indoor and outdoor air pollution hit a staggering 7 million people. That made it the world's absolute largest single environmental health risk at the time. To put that into perspective, 1 in 8 total global deaths that year was a result of air pollution exposure. And here's the kicker. It's not just about factory smoke or car exhaust. A massive chunk of this risk comes from indoor pollution in rural homes. Women in particular are put at severe risk daily from cooking over poorly designed chulas or fireplaces, burning green wood with barely any ventilation.
And well beyond air pollution, we are navigating an absolute minefield of threats. We're rapidly draining ancient groundwater aquifers for intensive agriculture, especially in places like Punjab and Haryana. We're watching biodiversity plummet as natural habitats shrink. Global warming is threatening to melt polar ice and submerge coastal zones. And then there are massive agricultural uncertainties, like corporations patenting sterile GMO seeds. This forces farmers into a cycle of dependency. And honestly, the long-term ecological impacts of those seeds remain completely unknown.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the inequality of ecology and its unequal impact. Here's the harsh reality. Social status and power largely determine who survives an environmental crisis. Take Kutch in Gujarat, for example. It's a water-scarce region where wealthy farmers can afford to invest in deep-bore tube wells to irrigate their cash crops. But when the rains fail, poorer villagers, the ones relying on shallow, traditional earthen wells, find themselves without a single drop of drinking water. They're left staring at the lush, green fields of their wealthy neighbors while their own wells run completely dry.
So ultimately, environmental problems are deeply rooted social problems. When the well literally runs dry, who truly suffers? The source material makes this incredibly clear. Securing what looks like the public interest in the environment often just ends up serving politically and economically powerful groups. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to look at the world around you and ask yourself this one final question. If understanding the environment means understanding society, then who is actually being forced to pay the ultimate price for our ecological decline?